Hi, everybody, and welcome to another edition of our podcast, Thriving LDS Singles. So here, Kay, and my co-host, Kim. Hi, Kim.
Hello.
Hi. Awesome. So today I thought we would talk about the topic of our afflictions being good for us. And I don't know about you, Kim, but I've had lots of afflictions in my life, and I have not ever been seriously impressed by my afflictions. And
you don't think they were good for you?
No, they never felt good for me. And I remember some talk sometime when I was quite young about a person saying, you need to be thankful for your afflictions. And I'm like, you've got to be joking. I'm never going to be thankful. But the topic came about this week because we were reading the Doctrine and Covenants in our Come Follow Me program, section 24, verse 8. And so the Lord's telling Joseph Smith, be patient in afflictions, for thou shalt have many, but endure them, for lo, I am with thee, even unto the end of thy days. Yeah. And that really hit me this time round. Joseph Smith's being told to be patient in his afflictions. And I think it hit me because I've just read the book Liberty by Dean Hughes. And I suggest if anybody wants to know about afflictions, and this is only the tiny bit of Joseph Smith's life when he was in the Liberty jail. And even Joseph Smith said that trial was one of the best things that happened to him. And you're going, how? And so the book sort of outlines and shows the trials they went through and the change that overcame all of the men that were in that jail.
Yeah.
And so when I then read that scripture, knowing that this was going to happen to him, I'm like, maybe there's something to this.
Yeah. Well, it is interesting because in the Come Follow Me, that is one of the things with them focusing so much on the history and really what's going on with Emma and with Joseph and all of the great history and stories. You do really get a much better sense of the trials and all of the things that they went to. I mean, it's just one thing after another on top of 10 more afflictions that they went through.
Yeah. And the Lord was trying to tell Joseph Smith, hey, this is your life. Because in the next verse, he says, I thought this was hilarious. He said, and in temporal labors, thou shalt not have strength.
What if that reminded you of your patriarchal blessing, huh?
Oh, the poor little Joseph. I mean, he's only in his early 20s. He's newly married. He's already had the grief of a baby die. Like he's already, like, as far as we're concerned, he's already been through a whole bunch of trials, right?
Yeah.
And here he's being told, and you're not going to get rich. You're not going to do very well temporally. It's like, oh, great. I'd hope to own my own farm and have a little house. And, I got dreams here. I'm just married. I got dreams here. And he's going, nope, that's not what's going to happen for you. You're going to have trials and afflictions, and you're going to have a tough life. Yeah. And I was telling Kim before, I've got a patriarchal blessing that I got when I was 17. So I joined the church at 16. A year later, I got my patriarchal blessing like a good little girl. And everybody tells me what a wonderful thing this is. And mine basically says, you're going to have a whole bunch of trials and life's going to be really tough. But stay faithful because the Lord will bless you in the end. And every time I've read that, I've gone, ugh, not inspired. And it's only now reading this stuff in the Doctrine and Covenants and studying, reading this book, Liberty and things, I'm going, I get it. I finally got it. Those afflictions have made me the person I am now. I have been through those things, and some of them are maybe even got self-inflicted. So maybe they weren't even part of I didn't have to go through those bits.
Yeah. Well, there's plenty of those for all of us, I'm sure.
But, I tell this little joke to people, and it's sort of only half a joke because I had a pretty bad temper when I was a child and a teenager, to the point where, one of my brothers has a nice scar above his head because I threw stuff at him, like, pretty bad temper. And so once I joined the gospel and learned that, that wasn't the way to behave, I used to pray for patience. And I got given 8 children and 4 stepchildren.
And you got some patience because of that.
And I got patience. And people will literally now say to me, "Oh, you're such a patient person. Oh, I wish we had the patience you've got," you know. And I'm like, this patience has been hard won.
Yeah.
I managed to not kill any of those children despite the temptation. So yeah, maybe it's not really a joke. I prayed for patience and I got given patience. Like people are really impressed by my level of patience.
That's so interesting because I almost every priesthood blessing I've gotten has blessed me with patience. So clearly I need some, but I haven't been praying for it because people have just been blessing me with it because they know I need it. In fact, I just barely got set apart in a new calling, and that was in the calling is be patient. And I'm like, okay,
well, maybe you're just going to get given it. I had to get the afflictions to learn it. But I learnt it.
Yeah.
You know, the afflictions. And I can honestly say at this end of my life, I am grateful for the afflictions I've had because I'm the person I am now because of them.
Yeah.
And that's what we hear Joseph Smith saying as well.
Yeah.
And the Liberty Jail was his major affliction. I mean, that's apart from the fact that people were stealing his plates before that, and apart from, you know, all of the other afflictions he'd already been to, Joseph Smith himself said Liberty Jail was the thing that taught him. But yeah, it's great for us to see that change that happened. And I think I can see that change in my life. I didn't have to go through Liberty Jail, but I've been through, you know, divorces and widowhood and teenage children and, you know, all sorts of, you know, enough trials, I think. And, you know, I am thankful to my first husband that I've divorced. I am grateful for the experiences and life he gave me.
I'm the same way. I look back at my trials and wouldn't want to change any of them because I feel like they made me who I am. So, but the question is that we were tossing around is, what's God's part in our trials? Like, do we have this list ahead of time that we're going to be born into a set of trials or have to go through trials that we kind of knew before we came down to earth? And then of course we know that our free agency and our choices put us in trials, and sometimes we don't want to take accountability for those, or we don't want to own that, okay, that's probably me that's making that trial over and over again. But you know, and then as you and I were talking about, there's always a situation where we take too much accountability and it's probably not the right answer. But so what do you think?
Right.
You think God intentionally gives us trials?
I think there is some of that, you know, we were in the spirit world. You know, the whole point of agency is that we got a choice. And so we had to have that, we had to agree to what we were coming to. Otherwise, because agency is a, you know, eternal principle. It would have been in the pre-existence right through to the next life. Like it's an eternal principle.
Yeah.
So we would have been told, like, you're going to get sent to a family that isn't quite as loving as, you know, others. And, you know, and some people, of course, get sent to, like, you're going to die of starvation in the first 6 months of your life. You know, it's like,
right. Some people,
you know,
get born with a defect or
yes, you're
an
going to
illness
have, so I think we had to agree to it. Like, otherwise it defeats the point for agency. But of course, we're living in this beautiful, like, with this loving people and our loving brothers and sisters and our loving Father, and yeah, bring it on. I can do this, you know.
Yeah, we signed up for it, but we didn't know what we were signing up for.
We didn't understand, you know. It's just, it's like, you know, we watch the beautiful young couples get married, and it's so exciting watching young couples get married. But I'm afraid I've got a bit of a cynical thing. It's like, oh, yeah, life's not going to be quite the beautiful roses it looks like at the moment.
Aw. Yeah. I don't know. I lost my cynicism. I did go through a period right after my divorce where I was pretty cynical. But now I'm more a believer in happy endings again, I think.
Well, happy endings, yeah, but the middle's a bit messy.
Yeah. You have to anticipate a messy middle, I think, for sure. But we certainly bring on a lot of our own trials and challenges. And that's really what you hated about your blessing, right? Is it was kind of warning you, and And it was right in some
It
sense.
was right. Yes, I can look back at that blessing now and think, oh yeah, the patriarch knew me really well. I managed to do all the things he said, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this. And I did them all.
It was God that knew you really well.
Yeah. Yeah, well, that's right. The patriarch didn't know me at all. That's right.
And see, I got my blessing late in life. So mine was like, well, it doesn't help me to warn her of all the things that she already figured out the hard way.
Yeah, well, getting warned of them didn't help me at all. So the best warning though is one of like, even though you have all those trials, don't lose faith.
Yeah.
And I think that was a really important one that I didn't quite obey that one either, but I did lose my faith for a while. But I think it's a big one now, because it's like when you have days where you're feeling lonely or lost or sad or things feel heavy, it's like, yeah, don't lose your faith. Remember that bit. Don't,
Yeah, it's going to be okay.
And so
Which is that is what D&C 24 said, right?
Yeah. I am with thee, even unto the end of the days. I'm with thee. And that's what I've learnt. And I think that learning of, there are days where you are alone and there isn't anybody to help you and there isn't anywhere to turn. And in some ways, that's the blessing of singleness, is that it's between us and God. That's it. There's no one else to rely on, to hold your hand. In marriage, you had a partner that you sort of tried to, whether it worked or didn't, but at least you tried to rely on them. But now you look around and go, and, you're crying in whatever trial it is, and you turn to God and you discover that he's there.
Yeah.
And he's holding you and he's looking after you. And the message of like, this is tough, but hang in there because it's going to look good.
Yeah. That's, I've had on my mind a lot lately, because I've been thinking about the singles and, kind of what's our personal responsibility versus what's the church's responsibility. We've, had some chats about that, but, I know that one thing is when you're in that period at the very beginning where you have all kinds of trials, potentially if you've gone through a divorce, you've lost part of your family. Maybe you've lost your ward family. Your whole support system has kind of collapsed around you. Like you don't know who to turn to. And in my case, my adult children weren't very happy with me at first. And so I didn't really even have my children or my immediate family to turn to. So you've lost that support system. And then at the same time, you're worrying about your finances. You're grieving the loss of a life you're not going to have. You are feeling depressed. There's just a litany of things that are falling down around you, and it's all at once. So it's so easy to feel overwhelmed and upset by it. And I remember distinctly feeling that feeling. And I think I shared this in my book, where I actually had a nightmare where I was in a car crashing down a mountainside through a bunch of trees, and I ran into the final tree at the end, and I actually died. And I woke up and I thought, I died in my dream. Like, how is that even possible? Like, you always wake up right before you die. That's what's supposed to happen. But so here I am flipping through Google and asking, what does this mean? And all the answers were, it means that you have to start over. You have to go through a new beginning, a rebirth. And I remember thinking, I am too old to have to start over. I'm like, that is not the answer. And I thought, I've just got to figure out what thing I need to be focusing on right now, because I'm so overwhelmed. I don't want to start over. And so I went to the temple and was praying and just asking God, please just give me the one thing that I need to be focusing on right now to help me. Just help me know where I need to put my attention right now in this moment. And he like clearly directed me, and I haven't gotten many promptings where he's clearly like, I hear him saying words to me of, you need to go back to school and move to Arizona. And that was that was so not on my radar. I mean, that was so far-fetched, but it truly was Heavenly Father knew me and knew what I needed, because it shifted. It was so clear that I couldn't argue with it. And it shifted all my thinking from how do I manage all these terrible problems and this stuff I'm, got steeped in right now, to, okay, I've got to find a school. How am I going to get to Arizona? And it made me think about my future and how to go through that rebirth process. And I don't think, if I wouldn't have got that prompting, I wouldn't have got to that phase. So I mean, I do think that if we can, in those hard, terrible refiner like fire times, if we can really turn to the Lord and trust what he's going to direct us, that he will tell us what we need to do. And in that case, I was in a state where, because I was still fairly new to going back to church and learning to follow promptings. And so it was kind of I'm not going to not follow what I think he told me to do, because I need to learn for myself how to actually follow a prompting. And then I, prove out for myself that I'm actually hearing the Holy Ghost and it's not just some random voice in my head. And that's the way you learn that, right? Is by following the prompting. That's the only way you can learn that. And so I was very much in that mode, but I'm sure there's many people that would have gotten a crazy answer like that and thought, that was just me, or that was too crazy to be what I should be doing, and dismissed it, right?
Yeah, because it does. It sounds crazy, but looking back, you can see how that got you out of the funk, and moved you forward, which is what God wants us to do. We need to keep moving forward, and with faith that He's got the final plan. He's got a good plan at the end, guys. It's going to work.
Have hope. Yeah.
But yes, when we're in the middle of that, you just think this is never going to work, and it's all a failure. And
those afflictions are so real and so hard to navigate your way through.
Yeah. And, I didn't always have the faith to do it. And, you look at the story of Job, where he had the faith all the way through.
Mm-hmm.
And, most of us, given that set of circumstances, would be going, stuff you, God. Like,
yeah.
Whereas his friends sort of said, well, God obviously doesn't love you anymore. And he was still able to say, no, God's still there. Mm-hmm. It's looking a bit, I'm not quite sure where he is in this story, but Job was able to say he's still there. Whereas, some of us humans aren't quite so good at it. And the other story that in the Bible is the Joseph of many colors, the Abraham's son Joseph. His story, many times you would think in his story he would have gone, well, God doesn't love me, obviously. It's like, he just went from bad to worse again. Like, it was terrible. But he was the salvation of Egypt and his own family. Like, it's so you've got to get to the end to go, that's what it was all about.
Because he wouldn't have been capable of getting there had he not gone through all those trials. And that's the part we have to remember, is that we really are getting refined as we go through that process. But man, it doesn't feel like it.
I have a quote that I have looked up. So it's Delbert L. Stapley in a conference talk. And he says, sometimes in the eternities to come, we will see that our trials were calculated to cause us to turn to our Heavenly Father for strength and support. Any affliction or suffering we are called upon to bear may be directed to give us experience, refinement, and perfection. Which is really what section 121 says. Our trials are for our good. And even the ones we bring upon ourselves, still God can make
use
them
it.
work.
He can use it. And I think that's a really important aspect that we need to remember. And I just was recently listening to a amazing fireside talk where, she was a meth addict, and she was talking about how she was pretty confident that she wasn't worth anything, and that God, she had destroyed everything around her and people's lives around her, and that he wasn't going to listen to her. And she brought up that Alma the Younger story, and it was like, just, he wants you to reach out to him. He is begging you to reach out to him, and he is there. And just, we need to remember that part of it, I think, too, like, because a lot of people get to that point too, of not the, we have all the extremes of I'm doing everything right and I'm getting all these things going wrong, all the way to I'm doing all these things wrong. He's not going to listen to me anyway. And in all of those scenarios, that's just not true. It's not the case.
He's there with all of them. Who was that? We did that wonderful interview with the guy that had been an alcoholic and God had saved him.
Yes. Yeah. Ty Butler.
Ty Butler. That was a great testimony of that, wasn't it? God's there even in the, no matter what you're doing and how bad life's got, he's there.
Yeah.
This is a talk by Neil A. Maxwell called Lest Ye Be Wearied and Faint in Your Minds. And he's saying that, he's obviously speaking at the end of the general conference. And he said, having all been richly nourished by this general conference, he said, but I want to focus on the few in the church who remain spiritually undernourished, including those who have grown weary and fainted in their minds. So, like we can listen to all these great talks and you go, yeah. So it's like, that's for the good little saints. That's for, you don't understand my situation. Life's much harder.
Yeah.
And he goes on about all of the things that can have happened, the sicknesses and the economic pressures and the loss of loved ones. And adversity can increase faith or instead can cause the troubling roots of bitterness to spring up. And, we've all had those experiences where life's been really tough. And he goes on.
And we probably all know of somebody who grew bitter and fell away from the church because God wasn't there,
because people, the bishops didn't care. No one came to visit me.
Right.
People talked about me. People were mean to me. There's lots of that stuff, isn't it?
Yeah.
But he says, whatever the preceding causes, any fainting in our minds brings a loss of spiritual consciousness, and with this, the inclination to charge God foolishly.
Oh, I like
so
that.
It's, it's things happen, but God's got a plan, guys. And the messy middle bit, and that comes from Emily Bell Freeman. She often talks about the messy middle. And she tells stories about her life and the messy middle bit. And I'm, that's like, we often sort of, hey, God isn't here. And it's because you're in the messy middle bit. It's like, hang on, he's coming. It's like the solutions are coming. You just got to be patient.
There's a bigger picture you can't see.
You've got to see and one's life cannot be both faith-filled and stress-free. It's like, and I wish I need to find where this quote comes from, but it's like, if we want the blessings of Abraham, if we want the blessings that Joseph Smith's getting, we have to go through the trials. You can't go up there and say, hey, good, well done, mate. You did a great job. Oh, but I had a great life. Thank you very much. I had a stress-free life. It's just not the way it's going to work.
Yeah, you're not going to learn anything if that's the case.
And so Wilford Woodruff said, the chastisements we have had from time to time. Remember, Joseph Smith got chastised. And, some of the others, like, what's his name? Like his chastisements in here in the Doctrine and Covenants. And he actually argued that it shouldn't have been when they were trying to put the Doctrine and Covenants together. And you're going, I would have argued for that not to be in there too. It's like, it's like,
but we need to know that. I mean, I do think it goes back to what we were saying, is that through all of the adversity and all those trials, God's love for us and our worth are never in question. Those two things are never in question. They're not part of the equation of
they should
trials. Yeah. In God's eyes, I guess, or the way God sees us, they're not.
The God sees us. That's what we often feel it. It's like, and that's what, my patriarchal blessing. I used to feel, why doesn't God love me? Why does everybody else get such lovely blessings and I get this bad one? It's like, oh, maybe he knew me.
Yeah, he sent you down here to experience some certain life circumstances.
Yeah. But and so this is Wilford Woodruff saying, the chastisements we have had from time to time have been for our good and are essential to learn wisdom and carry us through the school of experience we never could have passed through without. You know, we that's what we came to earth for.
Yeah.
It's taken me a long time to learn this.
Yeah.
Note, everybody, this is hard-won knowledge.
I guess that means is the fact that we're all single and have been through some pretty significant trials in our lives to end up in that place later in life, that I guess we should feel good that we've had the privilege of going through so many hard things. Pretty hard to look at it that way sometimes.
That's a good way to look at it, because that's what he's saying. How can you and I really expect to glide naively through life as if to say, Lord, give me experience, but not grief, not sorrow, not pain, not opposition, not betrayal, and certainly not to be forsaken. Like, keep me, Lord, from all of those experiences which made thee what thou art.
Yeah.
Then let me come and dwell with thee and fully share thy joy. It's just not, you know, Jesus went through all of that stuff. Like, you know, even his apostles couldn't stay awake when he was going through the biggest trial of the lot. His friends, his best friends left him.
That's true. Yeah, he's experienced it all for us.
Experienced it all. So why should we have a better life than that? Like, why should we think that we, give me the good life? It's like,
yeah.
And no one is going to get into exaltation without having had the trials.
Yeah. Yep. I agree. So bring them on, I guess that's what we should be saying, huh?
I still haven't quite.
I was just kidding, God.
I haven't quite got to that spot. I'm at the spot now where I think I've done the trials. That's great. Thank you very much. I've learned my lessons. I'm enjoying my life right now. And it's like,
yeah. Well, I feel the same way. I feel very blessed right now, even though, nobody's life is without trials, no matter where they are, but I certainly feel blessed. And I feel so thankful for the trials that I have gone through, even though, boy, were they not something I'd want to have to go through again.
I've actually been thinking about that recently, because I would say my life's pretty cruisy now. Like, it's pretty cool. And I'm thinking, I don't have any trials. But I mean, we went through a cyclone 2 weeks ago. Like, it's like, oh yeah, that's right. That was some people felt that was a big trial. Whereas I went through it with faith.
Yes.
And so now it's more, it's a cyclone, bring it on. She'll be right.
I think that is a really good point that maybe is a good thing to end on, because really what we're saying is that the more full we can keep our lamps, so the more equipped we are, and as we fill our lamps, the things that we have to go through are not quite as dramatic. And I do think there's a lot to be said for that we need to make that investment and, keep our lamps full.
That's probably is it. Yeah, it was like, even if I die, which, this cyclone wasn't bad enough that I was really worried about dying, but some of the people around me they were really panicked.
Yeah.
And I was like, and I died. Great.
Yeah. Yeah.
If that's the worst thing that's going to happen, it's like, that's good. That's okay, because I'm pretty comfortable in where I'm. Yeah. So, we are being told that these are the last days, and there is, if you watch the news very much, it feels like it's the last days. It's feeling pretty tough.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of people having some really tough stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But, prophets of old were excited about the last days. They were like, we bring it on.
Mm-hmm.
We got told that we're going to be in those last days. We're going to be part of that.
Yeah.
Don't need to fear. This is the plan.
Yep.
But keep that lamp full. That was definitely the message of that parable. Keep that lamp full.
Yeah.
So we would love to hear from anybody. If you disagree with this, if you've got some more points that you'd like to add, if you'd like to ask us some questions, we would love to hear from you.
We would love to hear from you.
Thank you, Kim, for discussing this with me today. And we hope everybody has a wonderful week.
All right. See you next week.
Bye.
Bye.